Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to be in this space with you. The last time I was here, Father Jim was showing me around and I was seeing the construction in the kitchen. And now I can tell you that every time I come, there's something new and amazing and so here. So you have quite an amazing campus. Having seen those well parishes in the diocese, I can say that with great confidence. I also like your collection of mugs, and I figured in light of my little trip and fall and victory that I would use the far side one that says "Bummer with a birthmark, Al." Well, I want to begin this morning by talking with you a little bit. I have seen your the great meeting that took place on August 4th. I watched that video, took some notes. So what I want to do this morning is respond to some of the questions that got asked in that meeting. Tell you a little bit about the process. I can talk to you all day long until you're so bored your teeth are falling out about what our process is, but let's start with me. So you know who I am and what I'm about. I'm a Canandaigua native. My family has been in Canandaigua since 1904. I actually grew up in Canandaigua, went to high school in Brighton and then U of R, and then I went to Harvard Divinity School. And I moved back here in, I guess it was 2000. I worked, before I became a priest, I was a hospital administrator. So I worked as the vice president of planning at Thompson Hospital. And about 10 years ago, I became ordained as a priest. I joined the bishop's staff 5 years ago. I've been doing transitions work since September of 2019. You are my 26th transition. We have right now in the Diocese of Rochester, we have 43 parishes, we have 13 openings, which is a little saddening to me because last December, oh, I died. Am I there? Can you hear me? Last December, we were down to one opening, and I actually, you all know Bishop Lane, right? I actually witnessed Bishop Lane say, "We only have one opening." I was like, easy dancing. And then January rolled around, and everybody said, "I'm retiring. I'm retiring. I'm retiring." So we have 13 openings, but not all of them are full-time. In fact, a number of them are not. So let me just see if I can list them off for you. The Episcopal Senior Life Communities, which is of course up in Rochester and is a program of both the Episcopal Church Home and 9 different residential and retirement communities. They are looking for a chaplain. St. Peter's Henrietta is looking for a half-time rector. Zion in Avon is looking for a half-time rector. St. George's Hilton is looking for a half-time rector. Incarnation in Penfield is looking for a half-time rector. Trinity Place, Geneva is looking for full-time. St. John's Canandaigua, full-time. St. Peter's Geneva, full-time. Down in Allegheny County, St. John's, Wellsville, Christchurch, Cuba, St. Paul's, Angelica, which are 3 that will be put together. They're looking for a single full-time priest. And I'm currently serving as the priest in charge until we find someone. Who else have I not yet named? Christchurch, Rochester is looking for a full-time rector. Christchurch, Pittsburgh is looking for a full-time rector. So we have people at all different stages. Some folks are interviewing their finalists and should hire by the end of September. Some folks are very, very early into it, like Christchurch, Pittsburgh, whose rector has not yet left. She's leaving to get married and move out of state. So they are preparing to say goodbye. So let's talk a little bit about once that goodbye has happened and the use of interim clergy. We have not tended to use interim clergy in the Diocese of Rochester very much, simply because there aren't very many interim clergy out there. Interim clergy have specialized skill sets. They're very good with administration. They're very good with helping say goodbye to the old priest and prepare for the new priest. They're good at keeping ministries going. They're not there to change anything. They're not there to completely redo or take over. We bring them in one of three situations. Either somebody's been there a very long time, and believe me, 43 years is just about a record in the church right now. The average tenure of clergy is 5 to 7 years now.
Yep.
Or there's been some major trauma, financial trauma, or a major conflict. We might bring in someone, or it may be, and this is especially true post-COVID, that there's been a huge change in the community. There's been a huge amount of new housing built, or there's been a real loss of people, or the church itself has had some change that you need someone to come in and help visualize what the future will be. An interim's only job is to make sure that the permanent job, not the permanent priest, not be what's called an unintentional interim, which is to say, we rushed and we got a priest and we liked that priest, but pretty soon we realized that that priest isn't the past priest. It isn't the priest we really need. And so they last about 1.5 years or 2, and then they're on. So we train up interims, and we are training more of them in our diocese right now to help to make sure that we don't have unintentional interims. So you can really spend the time you need to in your search for your permanent person and not worry, oh my gosh, we've just got to get somebody in here because it's too much for us as laity to maintain. Okay. The key for all of this is your choice. Your choice. In the Episcopal Church, unlike the Methodist Church or the Catholic Church or many Christian denominations, the priest is called by the wardens and vestry. The search committee does the work of finding the priest, but the permanent priest and the interim are called by the vestry. My job is to help find somebody who might be good in the position. So I know there might be some questions about, well, gee, what is it that Virginia does? Because it's been a while since we've done this, and it used to be that the parish really did its own work. We don't do that anymore for a couple of reasons. One, we have so many openings right now in the church that your materials could go out there for people to look at, but frankly, they'd just be lost in the wind. So here's why we have so many openings and too few clergy. It's a simple math problem. We've got about 5,500 congregations in the Episcopal Church, which is worldwide, okay? And you're part of the Anglican Communion, but the Episcopal Church of the United States has presence in Japan, Guam, Australia, France. We're all over the place. We've got about 5,400 congregations. We've got about that many clergy. The problem is the heyday for clergy was back in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s when people were going to seminary in large numbers. They are now retiring in large numbers. So when I graduated from Harvard Div in 1994, they said to me, we can't give you a job in Boston. Why don't you go to North Dakota? I was like, no. So I ended up not being ordained at the time. But the reality now is for every 2 clergy that retire, we only have 1 person going into seminary. And that math is playing out right in this community. Cam Miller's retiring from Trinity, Jim is retired here, Matt Crow is going into seminary. Okay, so we've got fewer people going into seminary. We also have people going into seminary far later. It used to be the average age of ordination was what I was in 1994, 27. It's now 48. And that's because people tend to come to ministry now as a second career. And when they do that, they get ordained at 48. Already we've knocked 20 years off of their life as a priest because we have to retire at 72. But the other thing about that is by the time a person is 48, they probably are in a relationship with somebody who has a career of their own. They probably have a social life, housing. Right now is not the time to be selling a house and buying a house. They probably have some geographic constraints, like family members or kids in school, or again, the spouse's job. So the capacity for clergy to move is far less than it used to be. So what we do with searches is once we have an interim, and I'll speak to you about that in a minute, we really do a ton of networking. So my job is that I work very, very closely with the people in my role in all of the 100 dioceses around the world. We get to know each other very well. This is how well we work together. The general convention, I organized a get together of my counterparts who were there. And the guy from France said to me, hey, I need somebody for a parish in Belgium. Do you have somebody who's fluent in French? I said, you know, I do. Hold on. I called a classmate of mine who is currently in Phoenix. I said, Allison, aren't you French fluent? She said, yes. I said, you want to go to Belgium? She said, full-time or part-time? I said, part-time. She said, no, can do. What do you have in Germany? So this really kind of how it happens. This is how it happens. So or somebody will call me and say, I'm looking for this. What do you have? And I'll say, my buddy Rich in Western Mass called me about this. And I said, Rich, I don't have it, but call Belinda in Central Pennsylvania. She does. So it's all relationship based. How do I maintain the relationships? Well, a lot of it is via email. A lot of it is by conferring with my colleagues about who is interested in looking for jobs, whose classmates are looking for jobs. A lot of it is trolling social media. I've seen this a lot. But I travel a lot. And so the week of just September 15th and 19th, I'll be in Maryland at a conference with 30 other dioceses. And I lovingly refer to that as either the NFL draft or the baseball draft. And it's kind of like, you know, I got a parish. What do you want? You want really long? You want small? It really works. We sit around just like you all are. And for those who can't be there in person, we bring them in on Zoom, praise God for Zoom. And we talk about the clergy we have available, what their high parts and points are, what their learning needs are, growing edges, history, etc. And we talk about what parishes we have. And then catch this, it's super high tech. We use Post-it notes. And I might go up and say, you just told me about this parish in Ludlow, Massachusetts. I've got this guy, Joel, who's fantastic. Oh my gosh, call me. We'll talk about Joel. So what happens is when somebody applies, they apply to me. And the reason they apply to me and not to you is to protect you, friends. Because I will then do a fair bit of research by calling my counterpart in their diocese. I will also look them up. I'll read through all of their materials online. I will check that they're actually a priest in good in standing and able to look for a job. I've had priests apply who aren't even still eligible to wear a collar, let alone apply for a job. I will run a background check. Make sure their credit's okay. Make sure they actually went to the schools they said they went to. We had a candidate recently for a position, and we were really in love with this candidate. I ran their background check. Their background check was so bad, I had to call their bishop. Their bishop removed them from ministry. So my job, because I have the capacity to access these records, and I will talk to their bishop, and their bishop will talk to my bishop, Bishop Cara, because bishops will say things to each other that they won't necessarily tell me. And this ensures that I don't bring you someone that you then say, we're in love with this person, only to say, there's a problem. Yeah. I also will, when I get an application, talk to the person at some length and say, and I'm always saying, let me tell you all about Geneva. Let me tell you all about Seneca Lake. Let me tell you all about why you want to come here. But let me just test you. Have you looked at a map? I mean, we're laughing, but honest to God, we brought a candidate from Boston to Cornell, and she got out of the car and went, This is a lot farther than I thought it was. Really? Yeah, this saved us a lot of money. Yeah. So this is part of my job, right? To make sure that when we bring you candidates, they're really great candidates. So the first thing we're gonna do is bring you an interim. What does an interim do that is different than what the permanent priest does? The interim is there for a specific amount of time, typically a year. Sometimes it's longer, depending on the needs of the parish. But a year is a good number, especially if that person is moving here. They want to have insured employment for a year. We make it clear, very clear that they cannot apply for the job. And you may ask, why do we do that? Well, simply put, if they think they're auditioning for the job, they're going to behave differently than if they are the interim and they know they're leaving at a certain time. They're just going to behave differently. So we try and make it very discreet. And in certain cases, like right now, we've got somebody very part-time as an interim in Hilton. There are 2 or 3 areas that we really want that person to work on and do pastoral care and do liturgy on Sunday. So bringing in an interim, there's an opportunity to say, gee, where do we really think we need some attention paid in the short term so that the permanent priest can work on the stuff in the long term. I know there's concern here because you've got the Arts Academy, which is such an extraordinary thing to have in your portfolio. And we are going to make it very clear that in no way are they to have any they're not going to do anything with the Arts Academy. That's a fully functioning entity. And so we don't necessarily need someone to take that on. But I do think for your permanent person, it would be very good to have somebody who's either had some children's ministry and or school chaplaincy backgrounds, so they understand how schools and church-related academic organizations, even if it's arts education, work. And I think it would be really good to have somebody who's got as strong administrative chops as we've had in the past. So I have actually 2 candidates for interim that I'm going to be discussing with the wardens later today. I will just prime the pump by saying one is local and finishing up an interim gig right now. The other one is not local, but grew up in this diocese and wants to come home. And that's what I often find. People want to come back to the Diocese of Rochester because it's home. The cost of living and the quality of life are equally exciting and human. You know, we are cheaper than the rest of the country, and our quality of life, our education systems, our natural resources, our arts and culture are really extraordinary. And how about this? We're starting to get refugees for climate purposes. People who say, I cannot do another 4 months of 100 degrees in Phoenix. Or people who say, I can't take the wildfires in Western California. So they're coming to us, which more the power. So now I can talk with you at great length about the process. I have up here, I have printed out slides for a PowerPoint presentation. I decided against setting up my projector and doing full-on consultant for you because I figured an informal discussion is better. But what I want you to know is that we have 6 steps in the process, which will, if you take one of these and look through it, it should be pretty obvious what happens where. The stage that you're at right now is choosing your search committee. Once your search committee is chosen and finalized, then I will train the search committee on how to gather information from you. I understand you're going to do a holy cow survey, yes?
So just to clarify, you're talking now, you want an interim, now you're talking about going for the.
Thank you, yes, that's right, that's right. So the interim, you know, my goal would to have that person hired as soon as we can, obviously. But the search for the permanent priest will then start at about the same time we're hiring the interim. And searching for that person is a multi-stage process, where, as I say, I'll do some in-depth training with the search committee about how do we look for clergy people? Where do we look for people? Where do we post jobs? It should be a great relief to all of you that you do not need to build that great big glossy profile that you might have seen in the past. What we actually put together is fairly brief. It's a profile with the national database of churches. Every church that's looking has a profile. It's called the Office for Transition Ministry. I will go on the record, and I am not alone in saying it's awful. All of us transition ministers hate this database because they have not updated it in years. So the questions that they ask are the same questions they asked pre-COVID. Well, our lives have all changed remarkably. So the big piece of it is 11 essay questions, but each question is only 1,200 characters. Which is very short. If you're a writer, you know that's about not even a third of a page. Right, so you have to be pretty strategic in what you write. And that's why what you don't put into the database is so important. Your website, your social media. Can I tell you, I love your website. I was on it for quite a while. It looks really great. It's compelling. Yep. It's well organized. It doesn't make a person work. I supply in a lot of parishes. And oftentimes, I'm not quite sure what time the service is. Is it 9:30? Is it 10? Is it 11:30? What time is the service? And if I'm on a website and it takes me more than 30 seconds to find the service time, I want to pull my hair out. It shouldn't be that hard. Well, you all have this down. So I will work very closely with the search committee. The search committee's main job is keeping all of you apprised of what the process is and where we are in the process. The search committee's other job is making sure that we are keeping it all super confidential. Super confidential. So we ran into a little issue a number of years ago. I had been the rector of St. John's, Honey Falls, and I left to go work at the diocese. And they were so excited when they got their 3 candidates that they were going to bring in to interview, that the search chair, God love this man, he's wonderful. He got a little ahead of himself and he stood up during announcements and he said the names. And it went out on Zoom. And I happened to be on vacation in Italy at the time. And I got a call from the supply priest saying, is that the custom now that we actually say the names? And I was in a parking lot in Siena, Italy, on the phone going, you've got to call the candidates and get ahead of this and tell them, because now they're going to have to tell their wardens that they're looking for a job. Awkward. So we lost a candidate over it. And the other 2 candidates said, well, I was going to have a chat with them anyway. But all of this got to be confidential. So the search committee is working with the candidates while keeping the parish up to date on what's going on. The vestry is keeping the church and its ministries going. The search committee will work with the vestry. And when the time comes to bring candidates in, what we will do is have the search committee host the candidates, and vestry will come to a service that the candidate will do. One of the things that's really lovely is now, because of COVID and the internet, you can see any priest doing a service. Just pull up their church and you can probably see them, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook Live or whatever. You can see their services. So we don't have to fly and see them, which is good because it would be pretty awkward. Right? If all of a sudden this group of 4 people wandered in there. And if you're like everybody in the church, every church I know, the church would turn around and go, can you sing? You want to join the choir? Children for Sunday school. So that would raise questions. Whereas if we're all just watching from afar, that's okay. And that's one of the things I do too. I know preaching is really, really important to all of you. So I will be watching before I bring candidates to you. Do they have the liturgical chops? Do they have preaching capability? I don't want to bring you someone who won't fit your bill. You need a good, experienced priest. So I'm ahead of myself, so that we will bring this person in, vestry will have the opportunity to meet the person. Meet the candidates, and to, you know, have a chat with them, but what's really clear, and I'll work with vestry on this and the search committee. It's search committee's job to identify the candidate. It's vestry's job to receive that recommendation and vote whether to hire. It's not vestry's job to redo the work search committee has done. Vestry is deputizing the search committee and saying, we trust you to hear and listen to what it is we really want. So that we'll be able to, when you bring us a candidate, take those criteria of what we've said we want and say, do they check all the boxes? And if they don't, then we have to go back to the drawing board. And we've had to do that before, and that's okay. So I hope there's some clarity there about the difference in roles. Another thing that's very different, I hope is already coming through to you, is that I work really closely with search chairs and the search committees. I will review all the materials, I will edit the materials because I know what to read for. I'm also the one who has to post the materials, so I have to make sure that they're formatting correctly. But I will often sit with committees and say, all right, let's figure this out. What are we going to write? And sometimes I've even had committees say, we just can't get it together to do the writing. And I've said, great, give me the bullet points, I'll write it. And I'll hand it back to you and say, is this right? I don't like to do that because I want it to be your voice, not mine. But I also don't want you to get so caught up in spinning your wheels that you don't move forward. So that's part of my job, to say, okay, what do you need to keep moving forward? How can I help you? What examples can I give you so that you're not saying, well, we've never done this before. That's my job to work with you around all of that. All right, I've prattled on a good long time. Give me questions. Will we get this? Okay.
Following the answer to this, but not clear. Do some of these committees overlap? In other words, might vestry members also be part of the search?
Different question. Can we have overlapping committees? The answer is yes and no. So in very, very small places, the vestry will be the search committee, but you are not that. So in fact, by the way, did you know that the average size of an American Episcopal church right now, full membership is 62 people? Yeah, so you're well above average, but you knew that. So what I would, we do want a vestry liaison on the committee.
Okay.
So we will have one person, and I advise that it not be a warden. And simply because wardens are going to be busy enough, right? And wardens don't want to feel like they're just doing too many things. So one member of the vestry to be on the committee is great, but I would again recommend that it not be a warden. I would also recommend that as much as possible, you've got enough critical mass to do this. I'd advise that you try to avoid conflicts of interest. So if your spouse is on vestry, it might not be good for you to be on the search committee. We want to get a lot of representation. We want to get younger folks who've been here a while. We want to get newer folks. We want to get folks who maybe aren't as involved now, but were involved. So they've got some institutional memory, all that sort of thing. Did that answer your question? All right. All right. Over here.
Could you just explain a little bit the difference between supply priest versus interim priest?
Yes, thank you. The difference between a supply priest and an interim priest. A supply priest does what I did today. Comes in, does the service, maybe will have looked at the bulletin in advance. And sticks around for coffee hour. If there's a major pastoral need, might go to the hospital that day, but they're really just there for that Sunday and that's it. Whereas an interim priest is dedicated to you during the time that they are contracted. So they would be the pastoral caregiver. They would be the consistent Sunday presence. They would do any midweek meetings, any services. They'd be the one to regularly go to the hospital. They'd be the one to be with the vestry. Probably not It depends on the place. Sometimes the interim does preside at vestry. Sometimes the interim wants to see your warden to do it for consistency. But the interim does, think of their interim as rector light, because they are not necessarily setting the agenda for 3 years, but they are definitely there for that year. They'll be involved with stewardship, they'll be involved with seasonal celebrations, etc. They will be your Christmas and Easter person, whereas supply is just that Sunday. That pretty clear?
Well, it's wonderful, little teacher voice. Well, it's wonderful that you are taking a lot of this in your own hands. I just want to be clear, because you had mentioned the vestry that you also welcome networking through anybody here, if they know of a priest or somebody in another parish that's thinking of moving, etc. And they should do what? They should contact you.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
So.
Yeah, so the best way to get a hold of me is via email, and my email is on the diocesan website. I'll say it out loud, but believe me, you don't want to write it down. It's transitions@episcopaldioceseofrochester.org. So just click on it.
That's the short.
Yeah. Okay, great. And my cell phone number is there, and so you can reach me either via cell phone or email if you've got a priest. Even if you don't know if the priest is looking, but you just know of a priest, let me know. I'm not above cold calling people. And I have absolutely done it. I've thought, okay, what's a similar size parish that I know of? And let me, see what the priest is about. I've absolutely done this. You should have seen me at General Convention. If somebody had a collar on, I'd go, hi, where are you from? What have you done with? Okay, you're laughing. We're interviewing that priest in Pittsburgh next week. And it works. So I swear I was walking up to people saying, where'd you go to seminary? Oh, that's me to yours. Don't you want to come to Rochester? So I will, if you know of a priest, let me know. I will call them up. I'll do my research for sure. Yeah.
Was there a question we can give it?
Charlie, I just wanted that.
But no side of the search rules.
Normal size and searching, for your size organization, I recommend 9 people.
This is probably a stupid question, but, does the supply priest ever cross over into an interim priest status?
I have a comment that's probably gonna wind me up on the search today. Yeah, yes.
Can a supply priest end up as interim? Most of our supply clergy are retired folks, so they may not want to do interim work. It really depends on the individual. Right now, I am tapping certain retirees and saying, hey, can you really help me out? Can you do an interim gig? And depending on the individual, they may say yes or no. If you have a supply person that you really think would be terrific as interim, we can initiate a conversation. But I'm really hoping that the 2 people I'm bringing to you today, who are active clergy, not retired, and who are specialists in interim ministry, will make it so that you don't need to do that. That's my hope. And then your comment that.
I have this habit of opening my mouth and getting jobs. I grew up in the other, as most of you know, I grew up in the other Episcopal parish in town and went through a multitude of records in the time that I grew up in. One was a cornerstone of Trinity, much like Father Adams was here, and that was Richard Norris. And then after that, it was that 5 to 7 year timeframe. And I know Charlie and Nancy are nodding their heads sitting right next to me here, they lived it too. I guess my hope is that we don't turn into another 5 to 7 year cycle. We can't, there's too much that happens here. I've only been coming here for less than a year. And within a week, I felt at home. So, part of that was due to Father Jim, but most of that is due to everybody sitting in this room right now. And that's huge. Like I said, I open my mouth, I probably end up on committee. But can't say no. And but I think whoever is on the search committee as well as the vestry, that should be probably in the top 3 goals, is to make sure somebody that's gonna come in is gonna be here for the long run and deal with this. So thanks.
Thank you. So let me just share with you, what might compel somebody to want to look at St. Peter's and what might make St. Peter's a place that somebody would want to come to and stay. It's often the case that when somebody's had a really long rectorate, like Father Jim had, they retire in place and everything just kind of mildews until they finally retire. When I got to St. John's, Honey Falls, they had been without a clergy person for a couple of years. They'd been, clinching together supply, and they had a short-term interim that didn't stay very long because that person, well, just didn't work out. But I got there, and one of the first things I noticed, I went and looked at the bulletin board. So there wasn't a thing on a bulletin board that was under 10 years old. That's not the case here. You are super alive, super vibrant. The woodwork is clean and dusted. You are active. And that's attractive. Geneva itself is a town in the midst of some pretty incredible transition. And by that, I mean, I live in Pittsburgh, but I drive here to go out to dinner. Because you all have some of the best restaurants in the Finger Lakes.
Wow.
This is a growing artisanal community. It's a place where intellectuals will thrive because of the college and just who you all are. It's a place where you can buy an amazingly beautiful home for relatively low money compared to the rest of the world. And then you've got this beautiful lake, right? So there are so many things that would bring a person here. You're also roughly equidistant between Syracuse and Rochester. Access to superb healthcare, great arts, great culture, all the retail you could ever possibly want. So this is an attractive place to be as compared with, say, Booth Bay Harbor, Maine, also equally gorgeous, but there's nobody there between October and May. And oh, by the way, if you want to fly anywhere, you have to drive 2 hours to Portland, take a flight to Boston, and then, So I have a priest that I know of, the wife works for Deloitte. She needs to get on a plane every Monday morning. Well, if she lived here, she'd have 2 options. So you're an attractive place to be. And that might make somebody really want to stay.
You mentioned that you have 2 applicants that you're going to be bringing forward to vestry. Let's say they choose one. I think that's your hope.
And that's just for him.
What happens next? How long does that take to then?
The interim process of calling is very, very short, actually. It's surprisingly short. So because interims are impermanent, it's called a time certain contract. I have the materials to share with the wardens today. We'll discuss it. They'll decide whether or not they want to interview either or both. Assuming that they do after the interview, depending on who they want to talk to further, they may do a second interview. And then they will discuss it as a vestry and make a call. It's that fast. So you could have an interim person in place by mid-October, depending on what happens. Now, I have to tell you that they have life circumstances. So one of them is currently an interim, but who can leave his current position anytime. He's an interim sort of holding holding the lid on a pot, if you will, for a small parish out in California, so he'd have to move here. But he's already got an offer in on a house here, in this part of the world, this part of the diocese. The other person is an interim right now, and would need to give notice and then take a little bit of a break. So probably wouldn't be able to start until the latter part of October, or early November, but still pretty quickly.
Yeah, this will be.
The process is simpler and quicker because you understand that you're not getting married to the person. And I think that's a pretty good analogy. It's also true that you all have been married to someone for 43 years. So, you need a little bit of time to, if you will, date. And seeing some supply clergy while you're waiting on an interim, it probably is okay. And the interim is, you know, gonna keep you going, but it's not your permanent person. All right, I'm gonna go over here and then come back.
Good question. You said that you needed an experienced priest, but it sounds like an early middle-aged priest. Is there a role for choosing someone who's young and vibrant and energetic and committed to all the programs we have, as opposed to someone who's already gained their experience? Loaded question.
So there are some incredibly vibrant clergy out there. Have any of you been to the Delaware Boys Camp?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, have any of you met Andrew Van Buren, who's been the chaplain? Andrew was a classmate of mine in seminary. He's got 2 young daughters. Andrew is, I don't know, I'm gonna do the math and say he's probably 35. Yeah. The guy's so incredibly vibrant. But Andrew is very committed to staying exactly where he is. There are Andrews out there. There are a lot of them out there. The problem is I want to find somebody who isn't a cowboy. Because often those young, vibrant folks are cowboys. They're so brilliant and so good at what they do that they're off doing a million things a moment and they aren't good at operationalizing their ideas. They also sometimes are way too ethereal and academic in their thinking, and you kind of have to bring them down and say, you know, not everybody's read Heidegger, so referring to Heidegger in your sermon. They're out there for sure. But I think what I would love to bring to you, I mean, this is my dream person. Somebody who's been a priest for at least 7 years, who's been in at least 1 parish, preferably 2, who's been a rector before, because being a rector is a whole thing. Who has some good organizational skills and good executive functioning. And who also is just curious and wants to meet the community, get to know you all, get involved. So somebody who's pretty extroverted, I think. How am I doing so far?
Yeah, very good.
And they've got to have good financial sense. They've probably got to have some good experience in older buildings, which means they're probably not from the West Coast.
Yes.
Because most of our West Coast churches are under 80 years old. So they know what to do to build boilers like we have, or a roof like we have. That's not to say they can't learn. And please, God, I mean, please add that class to seminary education. You should have seen me down there trying to bleed a boiler. I'm like, is this getting my collar dirty? So I would love to bring you someone who is young and vibrant and gonna stay. I also want to have somebody who has the energy.
Yeah.
Because you've had the luxury of a rector who had a rector to life, who has limitless energy. Which is not to say they're gonna work 48 hours a day, but that person will be able to get more done in an 8-hour day than most people, is my hope. So, did that answer the question? Okay, what do you think?
Well, I'm thinking that if you, what I'm thinking is, there may be the exception that proves the rule, that someone who's only had one parish, for instance.
Well, there could be,
Yeah,
there could be, so
I just want to know that the line is open.
yes, it is. If it were, I'd be a hypocrite if it weren't, because I was immediately a rector upon ordination at the age of 48. But I had a lot of experience in secular. A lot of, healthcare and not-for-profit administration experience that made it that I could be a rector pretty quickly. But being a hospital executive or being a not-for-profit executive is very different than running a church. So there were times when my mentors had to kind of pull me back and say, oh, slow down, sweetie, we don't work that quick. And so what I would want to do if we had somebody early in their career is to hook them up with a really good clergy colleague group to act as a support system for that person. Yeah, exactly. And we do a lot of that. Yeah.
Much quicker this time, I promise. Just thinking timeline wise, if we get an interim that's on I'm just gonna use the word contract, a year-long contract, and we haven't found that permanent yet, then what happens?
Yeah, we just had this happen with the person who's serving as an interim right now. We then do 3-month extensions, which are simply documented as an addendum to the letter of agreement, and it's easy as an email exchange to which everybody agrees.
That's what's sparked that question. So thank you.
Just so you know, the letters of agreement are signed by the priest, the wardens, the CFO of the diocese, myself, and the bishop. So everybody's aware of what we're doing.
When they're interim, they come and rent something because they won't be staying permanently, is that right? And do they ever stay just a month or two, then you find someone and they're off, or how long does that take sometimes? Or how quickly can that go?
So first of all, let's talk about their housing. Both of the individuals that I'm looking at would be settled in this diocese and would commute to you. And that's something I have discussed with each of them about would they be willing to do that.
And they're interim.
As an interim, yes. If we were to find the perfect person in the period of time shorter than a year, most searches are taking a year to a year and a half. So let's just set some expectations. But if the perfect person were to come upon us and we found somebody quicker, there's always an out clause in an interim contract, and most interims with 30 days notice are okay. Believe me, I've got lots of other interim opportunities to which I could deploy. So wouldn't be a big. Yes.
I know the interim's not supposed to change much. They're supposed to come in and run the programs the way they are. Of course, a lot has changed because of COVID, and we're still getting programs back that we didn't that we had. And how would the interim do with things like that? The things that we might have done in the past, maybe moving like or a men's group or something like that. But we don't have it now.
Yeah.
We enjoy it.
So here's how I would answer that. The question is, for those of you at home, because you're still trying to get things back online that had gone offline during COVID, or you're retooling things, an interim is always going to look at it through the lens of who's driving this. Is it being driven by the parish or by me? It should never be driven by the interim, unless the interim is looking and says, as has occurred in a parish I worked with in Western New York, oh, we have a small embezzlement issue we need to deal with. Now they need to fix, but it should always be driven by the parish. So if the parish comes forward and says, we used to have this program. I'm going to pull your cooking matters program. It was on your website, but from what I saw, it looks like it hasn't been active recently. If folks came forward and said, geez, we would love to get that going again, then the interim's job would be to ask, what all is going on? Do we have the bandwidth for it? But that's really the primary question. And then, what do you need? And I'll get out of your way. That's the interim's job. Whereas a rector might ask the larger question of how does this fit into the strategic constellation? Yes, we did cooking matters before. Do we need to do a whole big different set of programs, different in conjunction with, etc.? It's a different lens. Am I being clear about that?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Just to that point, we as the vestry have been meeting fairly frequently, and one of the things that we will be doing is, putting together a call for engagement. That's to sort of bring together, back together some of the programs that we haven't been doing. And looking for new leadership to take on those programs within the parish, so, that will be coming, and we look forward to it. I think it's also an opportunity for us to stay united as a parish, and keep engaged with, all the wonderful works that Father Jim and Sue did here, so, I did have one question. We also are sort of, we're in that process of forming a search committee or putting out the interest for who wants to be on that search committee. Would you recommend that we form that search committee before we start the sort of information gathering process?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, so. The question is, do you form the search committee before the information gathering stage? And the question is, yeah, because the search committee do the information gathering. So they will be the holders of that material. They will report back to you what is found through the process. But yes, absolutely, the search committee should be in place before that. The other thing is the search committee will have to elect its chair. I always recommend that the committee does it themselves. And the chair has got to be somebody who is going to be my primary point of contact, is organized, has the time to commit to it, and is fairly adept with technology. Because we do things on Zoom, I send lots of emails, they need to be able to distribute what I send, etc. I bet a question that somebody somewhere has. What if we hire somebody? This is the nightmare. What if we hire somebody and it turns out that it's not a good fit? I can't even say those words out loud. So here's what happens. After you hire, I don't disappear. You'll be sick of me. You'll wonder, can't she please go away? So I will, the first thing I'll do in the first week, actually, is meet with the vestry and with that person and just run through expectations for the first 6 weeks, 6 months, everything from where are the keys to, what days are you in the office? When a pastoral emergency comes in, how do we get in touch with you? All those sorts of things. So I will lead that. It's usually over the course of a potluck supper with the vestry. If you find out early into it that things aren't going well, the first step is for me to meet with the person and say, look, I think that I will have already said, I want to introduce you to some clergy colleagues so that you've got some resources that you can call, especially if they're not from this diocese. I'll also take them up to the diocese and introduce them to every member of the staff and say, here's who you call for this, who you call for that. I want that person to know they are not working alone, they're not the Lone Ranger. But if you find that there's a problem, then I will sit with the person and say, I'm getting some feedback, and I'll try and coach a little bit. But if there's really a problem, then I'll sit with the individual, I'll sit with the bishop, I'll sit with the vestry. And if we need to make some changes, we will. And I have unfortunately had to remove clergy. I pray with every fiber of my being that we never ever get to that. But just so you know, it's not as if you sign and it's in blood and you're stuck for the rest of your life. Because who people are when they interview may not be who they are when they come through the door. And my job is to try and make sure that there's enough consistency there that you don't get a surprise. Because it's as much on me if it's a bad hire. It's as much on me, if not more so. So I have a very vested interest in getting you the best possible person I can. But you are supported throughout. Is that helpful? Okay. I don't want to see so seeds of work.
So I interview and hire people, and unfortunately, that's the opposite. Limited bases, thankfully. And one of the tools that we use on a regular basis, and it's for local government, so there's all the civil service tools and all that we have to abide by. But our 6 month and annual evaluations. Is that something that the best we can do with this new person?
Yeah.
Are you hitting our benchmarks or hitting goals?
Yes, so we do a process in the church called a mutual ministry review. And written within the letter of agreement is that a mutual ministry review will happen within the first year. And that is not so much an evaluation of the clergy person as an evaluation of all the ministries and how well everybody works together. That said, I'm a big fan, not only of regular evaluations, because we all have areas of improvement and goals need to be set. But I'm also a big fan, and Bishop Carr and I are starting to do this, of running regular background checks on people. Because as I gave the example of that gentleman who had to be removed from ministry, nobody had run a background check on him in 15 years. And they were all manner of things in that background check. So the other thing that you all should know is Bishop Carr and I are very dedicated to checking in with the clergy on a regular basis. So we, every week, have people we're scheduled to call. I check in with people, I take them to lunch, we ask them, how's life going? How is it in the parish? How can we be helpful? So I'm hopeful that if issues are coming up, we not get to the point of needing a performance improvement plan, but rather we've identified it and said, okay, Mitzi, you're doing great, but we need a little bit more external engagement with the community. Let's figure out some short-term options to make that happen. Is that clear? Everybody very much. Yes.
I liked your analogy about the marriage, because, I used to be in management, we hire and we fire, and, the process you outlined to hire an interim was almost more than our process to hire a full-time forever. I remember a lot of stories Jim tells about his first few years, or he told about the first few years when he was here. And about the parish grumbling about this guy's not going to be here long. This is just not working out. It seems like there has to be a process to get to know each other and to adjust to each other.
Yes.
And you don't just give up, oh, well, this guy isn't working out, we'll get a new one.
Yes, that's exactly true. The first year is really what we recommend the clergy spend that time really just building relationships, getting to know people, finding out the history, opening all the cupboards, seeing what's there. But not rearranging anything, not massively changing anything. See the church through a liturgical year and see how people do things. It's worked well. Everything you do for a reason. It's not precious. So see how things work, understand, build relationships, understand, who's really engaged, who's not so engaged, who's, got what going on in their lives. That's a really, really important thing. Your note about the grumbling reminds me of the Israelites grumbling in the desert. It takes me back to that enslavement. At least we had vegetables. And grumbling's going to happen no matter what. Because look, you're one heck of a great rector, right? Let's just name that. Great guy, did amazing things for this church and this community. And that's so true. And I hate to say it, I feel like I almost could bring in JC himself and he wouldn't quite. But jobs are not Jim doesn't mean they're not really great unto themselves, right? So building those relationships and it's kind of, I'm gonna liken it to this, right? I have a brother who got married and loved his first wife. The marriage dissolved. Then he brought in the second wife, and all I could see was her name is Nancy. And I'm like, no, she's not Joan. Not Joan, not Joan, not Joan. I almost called her not Joan. So it took me a while to see that Nancy was actually the better match for my brother. And has some really great attributes. So that's just something we all need to put out there and be aware of. And something for which we might need to do a little bit of work.
The only thing I want to say is, when Jim first came, we did not have diocese helping us. And it wasn't everybody that felt that way. And so it took a while, but, it was a whole different kind.
Yes.
And I keep, let's remember that, don't, Jim did have a tough time, but he also had people who supported him, but we had no support from the diocese. We never had anybody come before, like you have done, and so on. So this process is much clearer.
Yes. Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear the process is clear, but the other thing that we are aware of in the diocese is the church is more countercultural than it's ever been. Right? Fewer people around the country are going to church, and when they go to church, their expectations and their needs are different because they don't just have the socio-cultural imperative to go to church because that's what people do. So that means that it's kind of like when you boil down broth into stock, it becomes thicker and richer. And that means you gotta watch it so it doesn't burn. It's a terrible analogy, but what I mean by it is our job at the diocese is making sure that we can support you so that the people who are coming through the door are getting served exactly as they need to be served, however we can do it. Not to sit up in our offices in the basement of St. Peter's Church. Have you all been to our offices?
Yeah.
It's an old nursery school.
It's a terrible.
The floors are red, blue, yellow, and green formica. You have to spin a thing when you come in, a twister. And hand to God, there's a little plaque outside my door that says toddler. So I don't need to stay in my office. I'm happy to come down here and see you. But I thank you so much for your kind words. I heard some very kind words from folks too on that August 4th, meeting. I had a 20-year career outside the church and then became a priest, and I wondered for a while, why did God take me in that direction? I now understand it's to do this work.
Good.
I now feel that you all are my congregation, right? The open congregations are the people I serve. So you may have heard, if you've got somebody in the hospital that's strong, call me, I'll go. I've got my communion kit in the car, I'll go. If you heard me say at my sermon today, you got somebody who's really struggling and they call me and I'll say, I will find you a meeting and I'll go with you. So that the bishop will go, oh my God, don't you have enough to do? Yes, but I'm a priest and I'm devoted to you. I'm devoted to our open parishes and doing whatever I can do. And sometimes I miss it and I screw it up, and I'm very open to hearing feedback. So just okay. Thank you. Yes, I'm gonna go here and then please.
Is there a way that parishioners outside of the vestry and the search committee would be providing input?
Absolutely. Yes. There are myriad ways that input will be provided. So there's the survey that we're going to do, the Holy Cow thing is parish wide. Yes. And it can be done in lots of ways, hard copy, online. The company that administers it, that's all they do is administer surveys with churches, so they know how to do it and do it well. So yes, absolutely. But I'll encourage the search committee, interview people, even people who may no longer be coming to church. So for instance, some of you who are former Trinity people or long-term Genevaites might remember Howard and Sue Saban. Yeah, they're my aunt and uncle. And Susan couldn't go to church for years, but they kept her up to date with what was going on, and she had thoughts. So we will encourage that, and we will encourage that there are coffee table discussions like this. We'll do all manner of ways to gather information. Yes, absolutely.
one thing I think we as a congregation need to remember is that we didn't have just a single director, we had two people. And, you know, Jim would never have driven out of the driveway with that suit because he would never find his keys. Multiple levels, you know, if you want to make sure that it never got lost, you talk to Sue, and not everybody has that kind of support, so we've got to be very, very supportive of the person, because they may not have a Sue behind them, or they may not have a Johnny behind them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so let's talk about the fact that Sue was very much a minister as much as Jim was. There's a great point to that, and there's a problem to that.
Yes.
The great point is that Sue taught each of us that lay ministry is real. Right? However, Sue, being the clergy spouse, was, I mean, even their email is the same, Jim and Sue Adams, right? I think it's very important that we be realistic that most clergy spouses will not be as involved as Sue. In fact, some may not be involved at all. My husband is not Christian. He worships at the 19th hole on Sunday. Or at the tennis court, or what have you, but he did not grow up. He grew up nominally Presbyterian, but he's not practicing. He comes on Christmas and Easter for me. And my parish knew from the get-go, it was just me. But the thing we negotiated is, my husband knew that I was gonna be out at night. And so that meant I might have lunch at home with him rather than dinner at home, because he's retired. So as long, it's up to the clergy person to manage those relationships, but the expectation that the clergy spouse is going to join the choir and run the Sunday school and all that sort of thing that historically the clergy wife did. It may be a clergy husband. Clergy husband or spouse may have a very active career of their own. David Hanselman, who is our priest in Watkins Glen, his wife is a corporate attorney.
Right.
Super busy with her day schedule, so not involved in the church. So we need to be
Open-minded.
open about that, and you are hiring a single person.
That's right.
You got the bargain of the century.
Yeah.
Other thoughts, questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, listen, I'll come down anytime, really. I may not be able to do the service for you because I'm often down in Allegheny County, but the bishop is pulling me out of that. We're trying to hire for Allegheny County. But anytime you want to do something like this, I'll do it. I am so happy to come and talk with you about one issue, a lot of issues, whatever it may be. We're here. God bless you.